As it's been 6 months since the last update to the Apolitical World Map in December, it's time for a new edition to be released, and that has just been posted on apoliticalworldmap.org. So you can check that out if you want and follow along with the video. As usual, the world has seen numerous border changes in the last 6 months. One of the points that's drawn the most attention has been Myanmar. I won't go too deeply into it because we did do a video on it, but the military coup and subsequent crisis in the country have led to a situation of near civil war. As part of this, the breakaway state, the Kachin Independence Organization, has fought against the junta, while the main change that we've seen to the map was the Karenni National Union reneging on its previous ceasefire with the government and resuming its own military campaigns. Not only has the breakaway state harbored leaders of the street protests and provided them training and weapons, but the Karenni force itself succeeded in taking over an outpost of the Burmese military, the Me Tu Ta military base, along the border with Thailand. In Mozambique, had actually done an interim update to the map showing the capture of the town of Palma by the Islamic State. Since then, Mozambique forces have recaptured the town, though they continue to struggle with guerrilla fighters as ISIS maintains its presence just outside the town. One of the reasons that ISIS was able to get this foothold was that the Mozambique authorities did not deploy military force to the region, only worrying about protecting international investments in the area, a policy that backfired when large French investments were cancelled due to security concerns after Palma's fall. Mozambique subsequently retook the town, however, the deals have not been reinstated. In West Africa, in the fight of several countries against ISIS-affiliated and non-ISIS-affiliated Boko Haram factions, met successes near the end of 2020. However, in the early months of 2021, ISIS-Boko Haram forces have made advances again, and once again regained a foothold in northeastern Nigeria. On May 20th, the leader of non-ISIS-affiliated Boko Haram was killed, and as they no longer control any territory, the future of that faction is in doubt, while the ISIS-affiliated West Africa province has again made some gains against the Nigerian government, which has nonetheless had a mostly successful time in repelling Boko Haram, both ISIS and otherwise, along with its partners in this endeavor, Niger, Cameroon, and Chad. Although Mali has seen a pair of military coups, it has not seen an improvement in its military situation, as both Islamist rebels and the Tuareg breakaway state in the northeast each remain at large. Several countries in Africa, however, have seen an improvement in their military situations, one of which is the Central African Republic. This has been one of the most consistently split up and balkanized countries since this map project started, with the central government repeatedly changing hands, yet no faction able to control the territory, sometimes including the capital region, leading to these overthrows, and also leading to a situation where the rival factions have no incentive to get on board because they could just overthrow the government militarily. However, since 2020, Russia and its private military contractor, the Wagner Group, have gotten involved to bolster the Central African Republic's existing government, which has captured large territories and has also coerced some rebel leaders into standing down. Numerous outlying rebel groups remain, however, as does the breakaway Republic of Logon, or Dar el-Kuti. South Sudan saw an end to its civil war actually earlier in 2020, although the governments had not yet been unified. Since then, however, a unity government has been proclaimed in South Sudan, though it continues to conflict territory both with the northern Sudanese government and with spillover rebel groups from there. The northern Sudanese government itself continues to be ruled by a transitional administration, with elections having been scheduled for 2022. The South Sudanese transitional government's elections are scheduled for 2023. Another civil war to end in the last 6 months was the Libya Civil War. This became a major proxy war between the forces of France and Turkey, won by the Turkish-backed Government of National Accord, based in Tripoli. After repelling a campaign to take Tripoli and end the war by Tobruk Cyrenaica-based forces of the Libyan House of Representatives under Marshal Khalifa Haftar, the two sides agreed on a ceasefire and eventually formed a unity government to end the civil war after 7 years. 7 years that saw the Islamic State at one point set up shop in the country, multitudes of defections, the country split in two for several years, and now finally, hopefully, peace. Back in December, we told you the story of how in November 2020, the Tigray regional state had rebelled against the Ethiopian government, Tigray being ruled by a one-party state, the TPLF, which until a few years ago had ruled the entire country, the old multi-ethnic empire of Ethiopia, under that same one-party system. This, of course, meant the dominance of Tigrayans in government during this time. However, the current ruling faction had postponed elections until 2021, nominally due to the pandemic. The TPLF had gone ahead and held its own elections anyway in Tigray state, which was then declared to be rebellious behavior by the authorities in Addis Ababa, culminating in a TPLF takeover of an Ethiopian military outpost. This essentially put the Tigray regional state in rebellion against the Ethiopian government, and Ethiopia subsequently invaded the region with help from Eritrea, which has had its own back and forth on and off relationship with the TPLF over the years, as Eritrea has with Ethiopia as a whole. At the time of the December map's release, the Ethiopian government had just recaptured all of the lost territory. However, the TPLF had announced that they were going into guerrilla mode and might attempt to continue the war either through guerrilla attacks or through holding rural areas, or both. As it's turned out, the answer has been both, with several rural valleys being retaken by the TPLF, representing the existing administration of the Tigray National Regional State, which is effectively in rebellion and broken away from Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian government has subsequently declared the transitional government of Tigray in the areas that it controls. But before it had the chance to install a new administration of the Tigray National Regional State, the existing leaders continued to fight, and the TPLF again captured rural territory in guerrilla operations and now continues to launch guerrilla attacks out from those areas to sabotage Ethiopian government-held territory. The violence has been intense, both from the TPLF and from the Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, with hundreds of civilians having been caught up in the violence during this second phase of the war. In Yemen, the Saudi-backed Yemeni Republic of President Hadi has succeeded in taking back the last areas of Islamist-held territory in the southern part of the country, while the Iranian-backed Supreme Political Council in the northwest, under the Houthis, was able to eliminate the last vestiges of ISIS control in the central part of Yemen. However, despite the elimination of these rebel factions, the country remains as divided as ever between the three opposing governments. A tentative ceasefire between the Saudi-backed Hadi government and the United Arab Emirates-backed Aden-based South Yemen Movement government ended in disaster when the plane carrying the representatives from Riyadh to Aden landed and was subsequently bombed at the Aden International Airport in front of the foreign media. It's widely suspected that the bombing was committed by the Houthis, perhaps in an attempt to sabotage the reconciliation between their two rivals. In any case, although a unity government has been nominally set up, there remains a long way to go before the administrations of the Hadi-held areas and the Aden-based areas are unified, and thus the fractured situation remains. Right now, the most heavily fought battle is between the Hadi forces and the Houthi forces in Marib in the center of the country, a battle that could potentially tip the balance of power in the war. In the Sinai Peninsula, Egypt has eliminated the ISIS presence that had captured several towns and villages there. However, ISIS and several other Islamist organizations do maintain a guerrilla presence in many of these villages. In Syria, the main change you'll notice has to do with Turkey, which of course has a client state in northern Syria, the Syrian interim government. I neglected to note on the last update, or indeed the previous one, that Turkey had captured some territory from the Syrian Salvation Government, the Islamist forces in control of Idlib. Turkey doesn't control the city yet, but they do have a security corridor and control two major highways in the region. At one point last year, they actually clashed with the Assad government before Russia stepped in and negotiated a ceasefire, and right now Turkey maintains its small holdings in this Idlib area as a nominal exclave of its client state, the Syrian interim government. The final border changes we'll note are in Afghanistan, where the Taliban, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan as they call themselves, has expanded its territory following the announcement that American troops will be leaving the country and thus no longer backing the internationally recognized government, the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan in Kabul, which lost territory in several areas to the Taliban, especially in the south and east. What happens to this country after the American withdrawal remains to be seen. Less than a decade decade ago, when America had its largest troop engagement in Afghanistan, the entire country was controlled by the American-backed government. However, as the number of troops has been withdrawn, the Taliban has made all of the gains that you see around the edges of the country and in rural areas. And although negotiations are underway to make the Taliban part of the political process in a unified Afghanistan moving forward, it seems almost just as possible that the Taliban simply keeps on fighting and restores control over the whole country. I've said it before, I'd like to make a video on the history of Afghanistan prior to 2001 to put the current war in context, as I think a lot gets lost between the Soviet adventures there and the American ones, even while lots was happening and civil wars were raging in the country. America came in to overthrow the Taliban regime and get rid of the Al-Qaeda training camps in the country. It did just that and brought Republican democracy to Afghanistan, a system that tentatively remained successful over 10 to 15 years while America had its largest garrison of troops in the country. However, as a foreign military can't prop up a fledgling state forever, American troops began to withdraw, and again subsequently the Taliban has made most of these gains and seems poised to maybe even take the country over again. It remains to be seen whether this will happen and what domino effects it could have on the region and the world. We'll continue to keep our eyes peeled, as we will for all the rest of these conflicts around the world. Of course, we'll be back with another update in 6 months, but the full current edition of the map, June 2021, is now available online, apoliticalworldmap.org. You can also find a link to donate on Patreon there or down in the comments. Much appreciated there if you enjoy our content, and make sure you hit subscribe and the bell button. Thank you for watching. I'm Alex. I am out.